Hey folks, Eric Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. If you look real closely at what the United States is doing right now in Iran and around the world, you'll see that there is a broader strategy at work. The demolition of Iran's regime and its nuclear program are just two very crucial pieces on a much larger global chessboard. It involves, number one, controlling the world's most critical waterways and, by extension, the global flow of oil. Right now, the U.S. Navy is blockading the Strait of Hormuz, where some 25% of the world's oil trade passes through every day. Instead of going through the strait, empty oil tankers are now heading to the United States to fill up and, in the process, putting an absolute squeeze on Iran's economy. At the same time, the U.S. Navy is also patrolling another major checkpoint, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, where Iran-backed Houthi terrorists lurk and where some 12% of the world's oil passes through each and every day. And just yesterday, the United States and Indonesia signed a major defense agreement that could enable the U.S. to keep a very close eye on the Strait of Malacca, another critical global trade route located between Malaysia and Indonesia, where some 35% of the world's oil flows through. Folks, these three straits, Malacca, Bab al-Mandeb, and Hormuz, are the three most important waterways in the world. And it looks like the United States will now have a very strong presence in all three. This is not by coincidence. President Trump knows exactly what he's doing here. The big loser is communist China. Beijing was already hurting from the loss of its ally, Nicolas Maduro, in Venezuela, where it gets a large chunk of its oil. And now its friends in Tehran are on the ropes, and the U.S. is blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Since China gets roughly half of its oil from the Middle East, that ain't good for the Chi-Coms. Neither is the U.S.-Indonesia Defense Pact in China's backyard, because a majority of China's energy supplies pass through, you guessed it, the Strait of Malacca. All of this is unfolding as President Trump gets set to visit Beijing next month and meet with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping, as the chess pieces are clearly moving in America's favor. It seems to me that President Trump had a grand vision and strategy here all along, and he always has. Check out this compilation of clips from way back in the 1980s where the president, then a businessman, talked about Iran.
That this country sits back and allows a country such as Iran to hold our hostages, to my way of thinking, is a horror.
Obviously, you're advocating that we should have gone in there with troops, etc., and brought our boys out.
I absolutely feel that, yes. I don't think there's any question. There's no question in my mind. I think right now would be an oil-rich nation, and I believe that we should have done it, and I'm very disappointed that we didn't do it.
Why couldn't we go in and take over some of their oil, which is along the sea? You're going to have a war by being weak. The next time Iran attacks this country, go in and grab one of their big oil installations, and I mean grab it and keep it, and get back your losses, because this country has lost plenty because of Iran.
Nearly 40 years ago, Trump saying, I'd be harsh on Iran. They've been beating us psychologically, making us look like a bunch of fools. One bullet shot at one of our men or ships, and I'd do a number on Karg Island. I'd go in and take it. Iran can't even beat Iraq. Yet they push the United States around. It'd be good for the world to take them on.
Even back then, he was talking about Karg Island. And now, nearly 40 years later, you're seeing Trump's vision play out in real time. Just as Ronald Reagan spent years before his presidency thinking about how to bring down the Soviet empire, Trump did the same with Iran's terror empire. As a result, the moment of reckoning has arrived for Iran's regime. Now, up next, we're speaking to two military men because, folks, these major moves by the U.S. Navy, we've heard even U.S. ground forces, perhaps some kind of targeted incursion inside Iran or the Strait of Hormuz or Karg Island, maybe even to get that enriched uranium out of Iran. That's all on the table, apparently, so we thought it'd be a very good idea to talk to two top military veterans. Number one, Commander Kirk Lippold. Now, he was the commander of the USS Cole, which, of course, back in 2000 was attacked, a lethal attack by al-Qaeda. Commander Lippold is now one of the top national security analysts really in the world. So we'll get the inside story. He's a Navy man on the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Also, Bob Almondab, Strait of Malacca, as we just mentioned. He'll break that down for us as well. And then our good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, who's served in Iraq, elsewhere around the world in uniform for the United States, a veteran of battles both on the battlefield, but also in the War of Ideas on Capitol Hill. He's a former congressman, host of the Steadfast and Loyal podcast. So let's start with Commander Kirk Lippold, then we'll go right into my great interview with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Take a look. Commander, always great to see you. Hey, I know we're only a day into the blockade, but early returns, do you think so far it's having the desired effect on the Iranian regime?
I think, Eric, it's going to take a few days, if not weeks, for it to really have the effect that we'd like it to. But $13 billion a month is what the Iranian regime is not going to receive because they're not going to get oil out. Their economy was already in a state of weakness to begin with before the conflict started. This is really going to apply pressure. So it's hopefully it will, as Vice President Vance said, bring them back to the negotiating table with a serious outlook to be able to discuss the four key areas. And that is no nuclear program, including centrifuges, limited ballistic missile program, stop the support for the proxies throughout the region that are terrorizing and killing people, and get the Strait of Hormuz open as a freedom of navigation under international law.
Yeah, Commander, it seems they have no leverage whatsoever, and yet this is an apocalyptic Islamic jihadist regime. You've dealt with Islamic terrorists in the past. Of course, you commanded the USS Cole, which was attacked by al-Qaeda terrorists back in 2000. Can you talk a bit more about the ideology of this regime? You and I were talking off camera. Trust but verify, the old Reagan maxim during the Cold War with the Soviets, does not apply to the Ayatollahs.
Absolutely not. At this point, given their track record of 47 years of lying and murdering, at this point, trust nothing they say. Actions speak stronger than any words they could ever say. So at the end of the day, we have to watch what they do, who they do it to, how they do it, and where they do it, because they cannot be trusted. And at the end, like I said, at the end of the day, Tehran is going to have to come to a realization that they are getting backed further into a corner. We have already decimated them militarily, but they are still dangerous. They still have missiles available. They still have small boats available. So they can still project power out and threaten U.S. forces. What we want to do is, number one, ensure the Strait is clear of those mines, make sure that any targetable assets ashore that can threaten the Strait of Hormuz or other transit areas are eliminated, and then make sure that then they come to the table. They're serious. They understand that they have to give up those four key areas. And at the end of the day, we need to make sure that Iran understands. You need to be thinking about a transition in power, because if you don't, we'll put the conditions into place where your people will.
Yeah, Commander, great breakdown. And by the way, Iran's ring of fire, that axis of terror, including Hezbollah and Lebanon, they're under fire as well. Israel continuing to pound Hezbollah as we speak, and direct negotiations now between Israel and Lebanon in D.C. today. Very interesting time and very weak moment, needless to say, for Iran's regime. Speaking of which, the nuclear program. Commander, that enriched uranium still under the rubble, I guess, of those destroyed nuclear sites, courtesy of Operation Midnight Hammer. Does Iran right now have any capacity to try to restart its nuclear program?
They absolutely do. They are going to be trying, even using other nations and what they may be able to give and support them with, to be able to restart that nuclear program. When they came to the table with Vice President Vance, they did not want to give that up. That clearly shows that, unlike what the Obama and Biden administrations try to put into place, they're in pursuit of a nuclear weapon. A lot of them are apologists and try to explain that, oh no, Iran was just enriching as a deterrent effect. That's a bald-faced lie. They were in pursuit of a nuclear weapon. They were improving their ballistic missile program. Clearly, they lied about that because of the ranges that we saw when they took the shot with two of them at Diego Garcia. So at the end of the day, their nuclear program, they're going to start it again. And what we're going to negotiate is we need to get people in there, whether it's U.S. or International Atomic Energy Agency folks, that can get to that facility, remove the 440 kilograms of enriched uranium that are 60% or above, get it out of the country, and then get rid of the centrifuges. Don't even give them the capability. They need to demonstrate they can be trusted to be a responsible nuclear power, even if for peaceful purposes, before we give them that capability back again.
Commander so well said. Hey, about 40 seconds left before the break. Then we will bring you right back. The ballistic missile program, which you mentioned a minute ago. Intercontinental ballistic missiles were on Iran's agenda, and they could have reached the United States. The Great Satan was at the ultimate endgame for Iran to mount a nuclear weapon on an ICBM and potentially send it to the U.S., or at least have that capability in their toolbox.
Absolutely, Eric. When you look at it, just go back, take a step back from a few years ago. Every time North Korea did a test, you can bet there were people, scientists from the Iranian regime there to watch and learn from their nuclear program and from their ballistic missile and ICBM program. They were bringing it home to Tehran. They were trying to build that type of missile precisely for that reason. Death to America, death to Israel with a nuclear weapon. That capability could not be allowed to exist with the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
Now we've got this defense pact between the U.S. and Indonesia announced yesterday, which impacts potentially the Strait of Malacca. And then you have the Bab al-Mandeb Strait between Yemen and the Horn of Africa. These three crucial waterways, probably the most crucial waterways in the world, especially when it comes to energy supplies. The U.S. seems to have a hand in all of them right now. Is there a greater strategy at work here on behalf of President Trump? He seems to have a vision here, and that vision seems to lead back to weakening communist China. How do you see it?
I think, Eric, you're absolutely right. When you look at those three Cree waterways, and I'll add a fourth one in a minute, when you look at those areas, clearly the Houthi rebels in Yemen have already threatened the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb and operations in the Red Sea, and we saw how that really throttled the flow of oil and tankers and container ships through that region of the world. Strait of Malacca, a major waterway in Southeast Asia that absolutely needs to remain open. We saw the impact from that about a decade and a half ago when you had the pirates that were operating there. Clearly, that problem got taken care of with the tsunami, but nonetheless, maintaining freedom of navigation has always been viewed by the United States as one of our primary responsibilities of our Navy. So the fourth one that I will add into, besides the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Malacca Straits, is that look at the South China Sea. Look at what Iran did in surrounding the Middle East area with proxy groups that threatened and destabilized that region so they could exert regional control. Look at what China is doing in militarizing those 9-dash lines, those militarized islands throughout the South China Sea in violation of international law. If anyone thinks that China is not paying attention into how they can exert control through the Strait of Hormuz with Iran, they're looking at it for the South China Sea. And at the end of the day, they may have designs on Taiwan. They need to clearly understand from the United States perspective that the South China Sea will also have freedom of navigation there as well. And China needs to stop militarizing because they are, in fact, doing what Iran did. And we better pay attention before that turns into a malignant cancer as well.
Yeah, Commander, great point. And all this comes, by the way, as President Trump prepares to travel to Beijing a month from now and meet with Xi Jinping. Should be a very interesting meeting. And folks, by the way, Commander Lippold has done this at the highest levels as a naval man. He knows the seas very well, so he knows what he is speaking of when it comes to this. You also know the NATO alliance, Commander, very well. And it seems like the alliance, sadly, is in a very shaky place right now. How surprised, maybe not surprised, how disappointed are you that Europe just hasn't stepped up to the plate here over the past 6.5 weeks and essentially helped to defend Judeo-Christian Western civilization against the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism?
Well, Eric, I think you're exactly right. And I'll even go back further than the last 6.5 weeks. Look at what happened with the invasion of Ukraine and how the Europeans, in a very feckless and weak manner, did not respond, did not take a leadership role to the largest land conflict on the European continent since World War II when Russia invaded. So at the end of the day, they're trying to deal with that conflict. They're not living up to their NATO commitments. They're not allowing us to use the bases we need in order to handle Iran. Because let's face it, everybody said, oh, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Okay, what are you going to do about it? We've spent 47 years both Republican and Democrat administrations here at home, multiple administrations throughout Europe, but nobody wanted to do the hard work until President Trump came along and said, this threat can no longer be allowed to exist, and we are going to take the necessary action, first with Midnight Hammer and now with the current operations that are ongoing. The Europeans are going to have to step up and begin to realize that they need to live up to their commitments, help the United States if you want to be a defender of democracy, stop the flow of immigration into their countries that are actually destabilizing them because they won't act against the radical Islamists. So at the end of the day, Europe has got to learn that they need to be looking out for their own welfare first, with us as a complement, not taking a leadership role and not taking advantage of the umbrella that we gave them for decades to build out socialist programs.
Yeah, so well said, Commander. Either they want to defend their civilization or they don't. Commander Kirk Lippold, great stuff as always. Folks, check him out X across social media. Commander, God bless. Keep up the great work. We'll see you again soon. Joining me now to break it down is our good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, host of the Steadfast and Loyal podcast and executive director of the American Constitutional Rights Union. Alan, always great to see you. It seems that the blockade is already having an effect. Could this be the move that finally brings Iran's regime to its knees?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's great to be with you, Eric. It's been quite a while. I think the Iranians, they go by that Middle Eastern maxim that I learned being over there. Americans have the watches, but we have the time. Well, Donald Trump does not play by that maxim. And all of a sudden, they are not able to go and do the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about there, drawing things out to their advantage. Donald Trump said, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to show grace. You come to the table. We can talk about where we go forward. Didn't agree with that. So now we go to the next step. And this is a surprise to them. So we are locking down the Straits of Hormuz, and we're going to make sure the old school Navy way, you blockade it, you make sure that the right type of ships are getting through and exiting. And then also you make sure you get out there. We already see the minesweepers as well. Yeah. So I think this is a great step with geopolitical strategy to isolate Iran, isolate the revenues that they receive from the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, Alan, great breakdown. Even Qatar is urging Iran to kind of yield here and open up shipping lanes. Where does Iran go from here? It seems this was their last card, the only leverage they had. And now President Trump, as you just laid out, just reached in and took that away.
Yeah, it's check and checkmate, because the first thing was that we reduced their ballistic missile capability and capacity and a drone capability capacity, so they cannot hold the region hostage. The only other thing they could do is say that they're going to close down the Strait of Hormuz, which they really don't have the physical capability to do, because now they have a decimated, they don't have a Navy, they don't have an Air Force. And so now we can act with impunity throughout that area. Sure, there may be some shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile systems, but that will not deter our maritime forces. But it's not just the Strait of Hormuz. We also have to remember about the strait there called Bab al-Mandab, which is where the Saudi Peninsula almost touches the Horn of Africa. And that's under the purview, maybe the range, the missile range of the Houthis, which are another client proxy army. So we do have assets that are there. Those two major sea lanes of commerce, those two major choke points, are now under the I don't want to say tutelage, but under the purview, under the surveillance of the American Navy. And I think that's an important thing for the flow of goods and services and oil and natural gas.
Yeah, the defeat of Iran and its proxies, obviously major game changer for the Middle East, but also for China. Alan, you've warned about China's communist regime. How does the fall of Iran's regime, potential fall, God willing, in the very least, the severe weakening of Iran's regime, how does that affect China?
Well, let's go all the way back to World War II. And when we cut off oil shipments to Japan, we know how they responded by going after the Pearl Harbor. Energy is still a very important linchpin in the economic ability of a nation. And so when China, who gets 80 to 90% of their oil and gas resources from Iran, now they have to come to the United States of America. Now they have to get the permission of the United States of America. And woe be to them if they actually had to come to the United States of America to get oil and gas resources, because we've cut them off from Venezuela. We have cut them off now from Iran. And in 30 days, President Trump is going to sit down with Xi Jinping. He's going to completely own him. So this has a huge geopolitical economic effect for China and also for Russia, because of all of their weaponized drones that they got from Iran, now that is gone as well.
Yeah, Alan, it seems that President Trump had a strategy all along here. It's the art of the deal. It's peace through strength. And yet the mainstream media, the Democrat Party here in America, are saying America's losing this war. Iran's winning. I guess it was not surprising to you, knowing the Iranian regime's ideology, that the negotiations fell apart over the weekend. They took this maximalist position with Vice President Vance in those negotiations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. How asinine for them to say we want all of the sanctions released and we want to be able to control the Strait of Hormuz and you pay a toll to our Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. No, we're operating from a position of the moral high ground in every way, shape, and form and fashion, and a military high ground. So all they should have done was come to the table and say, how can we please leave the country with some dignity and grace? But I think that you will see now more economic sanctions against those regime leaders, but also you're starting to see their family members being deported from the United States of America. So I think that's another key linchpin in all of this. All of our elements of national power being brought together, and this is a message being sent to the 21st century axis of evil, which include Russia, China, North Korea, and the Islamic jihadists as well.
Ken Paxton, the Attorney General here in Texas, announced last week that he's investigating a so-called Islamic mediation group that may want to enforce or use Islamic Sharia law right here in the state of Texas, in particular, Dallas-Fort Worth, where I'm sitting right now. How dangerous is this threat? Some people say, well, it's overblown, Sharia in America, but I look at what's happening in Europe and I see the inroads being made, including right here in Texas, and I'm very concerned. How do you see it?
Well, look, Eric, you've been talking about this for quite some time. I recommend people to go back and read your book, The Brotherhood, because that's exactly what we see unfolding. When you look at all of those subsidiary organizations that the Muslim Brotherhood said that they would implement an institute here in the United States of America as part of their strategic memorandum, that's where we are. And there's an organization out there called the Association of Muslim Jurists of America, AMJA, and this is what they're doing. Behind the scenes, they're having these different type of Sharia courts, and Sharia law is not compatible with our United States Constitution, our rule of law, as we see is not compatible with English common law, but still they're able to implement it because you've had people there in UK that are turning a blind eye. And I live right here in Garland, Texas, and we have the same issues. So yes, it's important that we send a message to say that we're not going to have this infiltration into our country. As a matter of fact, we are going to have an event called the Islamification of Texas. Lieutenant General Mike Flynn is going to come down on June the 4th. If you'd like to be a part of that, go to dallasgop.org, dallasgop.org. But this is a serious issue here in our country.
No doubt. Thank God we're getting ahead of it. You're getting ahead of it, Alan, and we're getting ahead of it not only in America, but in Texas in particular. I think as Texas goes, so goes the nation. And people see what happened in London. They say, well, it can't happen here. Think again, hey, you have described the Islamic takeover, I want to get this right, and because you're so accurate here, as a four-step process: migration, population, agitation, and then domination. Alan, so well said, right on the button. Where do you think we are in that process in America right now?
I will tell you that with the rise of someone like a Zoran Mamdani, and you see several of these other American Islamists that are rising up into the political arena, I think that we're starting to move into the early stages of the agitation phase. And so we've got to make sure that we cut this off right now. Look, we're not saying anything against Muslims. We're not talking about people. We're talking about an ideology that is not compatible with the values of Western civilization. That's what we're concerned about. And when you have people part of this red-green alliance, because the Marxists are going to enable the Islamists, we cannot continue down this path. So yes, we don't have any problem with people coming to our country, but when you come to this country, you need to make sure that your principles and values are in alignment with those of the constitutional republic that we call America. So they are coming in without a doubt through migration, and hopefully we have our border secured. They start to outpopulate us. And as you know, there's a big concern in Western civilization with our population decreasing because we're not maintaining that 2.1 birth rate. And then they go into the agitation, and when they get enough of a population, they go into domination.
Alan, very well said all around. Hey, one thing and one concern is when they come, you would think they'd need ID to, I don't know, vote for president, yet the SAVE Act has still not passed through Congress. About a minute left. Your thoughts on that? Look, you and I need an ID to get a library card, but to vote for president, we don't. It's madness. What are your thoughts on the SAVE Act? And still, it hasn't been passed.
Well, I think that tells you exactly where the Marxists and the Islamists stand with the United States of America. Never forget that in 2024, 12 of the states that Kamala Harris won in her presidential bid, none of them had voter ID laws. So that tells you exactly where we're headed to. So it's very important that we control our borders, that we make sure that people that are here illegally are not participating in our electoral process. And when you hear someone like the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, say that one of the stipulations for opening up the DHS is that we don't want ICE at voting and polling locations, the question should be, why do you not want ICE at voting and polling locations?
Great stuff from Commander Kirk Lippold and Lieutenant Colonel Al West. Of course, you can follow them both across social media, X, Instagram, etc. And folks, we talk about this grand strategy, the larger vision on the global chessboard that President Trump has really had for, I don't know, at least 40, almost 50 years. The one clip we watched earlier was from way back in 1980 talking about Iran. He was still in his early 30s then. Now we see it coming to fruition. We've talked a bunch here on the newscast about this gathering storm coalition. We're talking China, Russia, North Korea, and yes, Iran. What Trump is trying to do is one by one kind of pick off the members of that gathering storm coalition, isolate them, weaken them, perhaps even cause some acrimony between them. Iran first on the chopping block, of course. Remember, the other three, Communist China, Russia, and North Korea, are already nuclear powers. Iran was very close to getting there, and they were boasting about it, by the way, in their negotiations with the U.S. prior to the launch of Operation Epic Fury back in late February. They said, the Iranians, that they had enough enriched uranium to build 11 nuclear bombs. President Trump just took that off the table, the Iran nuclear threat. Now it's China, isolating, which is really going to be the great geopolitical adversary for the United States. Right now, really, but certainly in the short term, in the long term, isolating China, hurting them economically and shutting off their oil supplies, their energy supplies. Again, President Trump is a guy who has all the leverage in the world. He knows it, and he's not afraid to use it. You see the art of the deal in real time. And man, I cannot wait to see that meeting next month in Beijing. It will be very interesting, needless to say, Xi Jinping's posture towards the leader of the free world, President Trump. Hey, if you like this, we're breaking down Middle East and Israel mainly, but China, Russia, Europe, right here in America, all from an unapologetically biblical perspective. Be sure to subscribe. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We just passed 1.1 million subscribers. Hard to believe for such a time as this. So make sure to subscribe. Much more coming up throughout the week. What comes next? Will Iran capitulate here now that the Strait of Hormuz has absolutely squeezed the regime economically? What comes next in this pivotal, which I believe a pivotal war that has prophetic implications? We'll be giving you updates every day here on the newscast and the Watchman live stream. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.